And I said, if your name is not on this board, I'm going to have to ask you to leave
Yeah.
this room.
You're kicking out political appointees, you're kicking out SESs, like, yeah.
I didn't garner any favors from that, but I wanted to keep that structure in hand. I wanted to keep the integrity of the process.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to the Optimized Podcast by Visible Thread. I'm your winter host, Chris Hamm. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Lisa Grant. Lisa Grant has had an incredible career across a variety of different parts of the federal landscape. We're going to go through a bunch of them here in a little bit. But first, just welcome, Lisa. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Chris. It's been a while since we've been colleagues at GSA.
Yep, so a little bit of a spoiler alert. Lisa signed the piece of paper for the biggest thing I ever did. So we'll talk about that. But before we get into the craziness of obligating billions of dollars of the government's money, let me go back a little bit before when the first time we met and just talk about, like, I like to just get this from everybody because this is good for like career development for individuals. I'm confident that you did not, as a child, when you're drawing like your, like, what do you want to be when you grow up, your wish list, that, I want to work for the federal government spending money. I want to like be the person who implements the rules. And so what's the first exposure? What's oh, I'm going to take this job at this place and do what?
Well, an interesting question. No, never thought about that when I was coloring. Always thought about spending money though, but never thought about the other side of it. One day I'd finished college. My father comes home from work. He worked for the Veterans Administration. He had seen an advertisement for contract specialists in the DC area. They were doing a mass recruitment, and he brought it home and handed it to me. At the time, I was working at the university in my hometown in Tuskegee, and he said, "Hey, this looks like it fits you. You may want to do this." So I applied and was hired as a contract specialist for the Defense Logistics Agency in Alexandria, Virginia. So that was my first entry into contracting, and I bought ground fuel for the military forces through the Defense Logistics Agency. And it kind of caught on, Chris. I really did enjoy doing acquisition. I really did enjoy negotiating, finding pricing, marketing piece of it, and it just kind of caught on from there. And that started my trajectory into acquisition.
So you mentioned the enjoying the buying part of it. For me, it was, I loved the deal. Like, I wanted to get the best company, but I wanted to get the best price too. So like finding where those two things fit, like it's like, oh wait, I get to decide, which company's going to do the thing. They're like that part is like early in your career is, you're in your 20s and you're like, I get to spend $200 million in this thing. It's great.
Right, right. And I think that's key, Chris, because the key to any successful acquisition is the market research piece of it. And that's where you find the companies and you find the deals and you find who's in the marketplace, who has done what you're looking to buy, the services you're looking to purchase, the items you're looking to purchase. And I really enjoyed that market research piece of it because I think that's the foundation of any good procurement.
And so let's dig into that, because I know you've done that in different places, and whether or not there's any sort of idiosyncrasies here. So the, DLA, INSCOM, all DoD kind of things, now Department of War. What was acquisition planning? What was market research? What was the way in which it worked initially, like when you were first doing it?
So when I first started, it was fairly simple. It was all fixed price. It was all fuels. We were buying ground fuels for various service entities and companies who provided those services, the Amicos, the Shells, whatever. would send us in. We would advertise. They would send us in pricing, and whoever had the lowest price uh, would get the contract to provide that fuel. So it was when I think about all that I've done through my career, that probably was the easiest portion of it. Fixed price, you send it in. I got 3 quotes or 4 quotes. Whoever's pricing is lowest, then that's where the pricing was going. I left DLA just when the new simplified acquisition commercial items piece came into the FAR because I wanted to learn that. And that really was not, we were really not doing that at DLA. And so throughout my career, as we talk, you'll see I moved and shifted to hone my skills and to learn something new. So I left DLA and went to the Marshal Service, where I bought court security services. And so now I've moved out of the fixed price arena. I'm into the cost arena now. So I am buying services using cost measures versus the fixed price, which was extremely interesting. And it helped me learn how to purchase using cost versus fixed price.
So you're buying with a different market space there, like like the
Hmm.
companies that are. So the interaction with them is it different? I mean, like fixed price and commodity stuff, like it's just like the written thing. Are
Right.
you suddenly having like industry days? Are you like having meetings with industry? Like how do you figure out who does that?
Well, exactly what you just said. We're having industry days. We are doing extensive market research to see who in the market can provide those sort of court security services. I was also buying equipment for U.S. Marshals. So we're buying Glocks. We're buying all sorts of magnetometers and whatnot for the Marshal Service. So I'm in the market now. I'm doing industry days. I'm writing extensive acquisition plans. I'm writing extensive source selection plans. I'm creating a technical evaluation teams. I didn't have that at DLA. We were doing fixed price. We didn't need that. So I'm developing and learning um, source selection in that arena. I did a lot of visiting to courts around the U.S. to just visualize what I was purchasing and to see what the contractors were doing and see how we could improve in those services to ensure that those courts were secure at the level we needed them to be secure.
So a couple of years at DLA, sometime at Marshalls, you jump again.
I jump again. I jump to U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command. Again, another intentional jump, wanting to expand my skills again and wanting to learn more in the classroom for acquisition. DoD was known for training their acquisition professionals. And I wanted to get back so that I could learn in the classroom and then take what I learned in the classroom to practice and do what we as acquisition professionals call walk the floor with it, be in operations with it. And so I shifted over to the U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command in July of 2001.
Yep. So intelligence probably changed a tad after 2001 at INSCOM.
Well, interesting. I came in July 2001. Certainly September 2001. Um, the planes hit the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, right? And we were up tempo from there going forward. A lot of long days, early mornings, a lot of long nights. Uh, but it gave me a one a better appreciation of the need for acquisition and the support of the warfighter. The warfighter could not have gotten it done without the up tempo of the acquisition workforce. It was at acquisition where I learned that one of my greatest strengths was being able to solve problems quickly on my feet. I don't need a lot of time. What is the issue? Let's get it done. Because I had to make sure whatever that warfighter needed, they got it. And we followed the rules, but we moved at a very quick pace in order to get things done.
So I wasn't planning on talking about this, but it's interesting because it's striking me as like that's something that's happening right now with the change in all the contracting rules and the urgency. I had the same thing, started in the 90s and then 2001. I all of a sudden realized because I was working on a Homeland Security thing. If we don't get this awarded, then we can't do the collaboration. We need to build this tech in order to do this thing. So I was working on this classified project. And it was the first time that my friends thought, oh, that government job might actually be cool. Like, what are you doing again? So that, and you're right, nights and weekends,
Mm-hmm.
like the pace doubles. And
Right.
then like the team building, like the nature of the integration of the program people, the acquisition people, being able to like, hey, we have a common mission and like this needs to get done. There's a couple of phases of that in my career, and I'm sure you've seen that too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And in working in Intel with the U.S. Army Intelligence Security Command, things had to be done. I can remember it was a holiday weekend and working. I was the only one in there because we had to get armored vehicles in theater, and I was working with uh, car manufacturers to armor those vehicles to a specific specification in order to get them in theater. And I couldn't say, well, Monday is a holiday. I'll pick back up on Tuesday. It just was not happening. It had to be done. And really, Chris, it was the first experience I had where I truly said, if I don't get this done, somebody's life is on the line. And that's real sobering for you. That will keep you up at night, knowing, well, I'm gonna take off. I'm going to bed, and I hope it all works out. I couldn't do that. And so when someone's life is on the line, um, you do what you have to do in order to support that individual. And that's what I did. And I say but my staff had a tremendous staff. We all work very long hours, and I put a lot of pressure on them, but I stayed and supported them. I didn't say, "Well, you get this done. I'll see you on Monday." No, we were all in the trenches together, and that's what it's all about.
So I think we crossed paths shortly after that. What,
Hmm.
2005 ish?
2000 July 2005, I came to be the director of acquisition for the civilian sector, and I tell you, I came to FedSim because you were in assisted acquisition service. You were supporting all of the majority of the federal government in contracting. And it gave, again, another opportunity to learn. It gave me an opportunity to learn what other agencies were doing and even learn their procurement regulations because every agency has their own supplement, right? And to work with other agencies. And it helped me tremendously in my career. It really did.
Yeah, the breadth of what that office does. Like, oh, today we're doing something for HUD. Tomorrow
Right.
we're doing something for the CIA. Tomorrow, I mean, like the yeah.
Agriculture, Homeland Security, you name it. It was FAA. It was a very impressive portfolio and a trusted agent to those federal agencies. They trusted a FedSam, an assisted acquisition service, to get the job done, and we got it done.
All right, so the seminal experience for me, the thing that we both got pulled into
Hmm.
was the St. Elizabeth's construction project.
Yes.
Um, and that you know,
I was dragged into it. Let me be very clear about that.
yeah.
Because I was no
Um,
longer in FedSim when they came and got me.
anybody who's listening to this podcast and who's watching it, um, I was the deputy and Lisa was the boss of a whole other part of GSA. And something went so south that they're like, we're going to pull you back in and fix it.
Yes. And interesting, I was thinking about that the other day because our former colleague Steve called me on the phone. I was Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Acquisition Management, no longer in Assisted Acquisition Service, doing something completely different. He calls me on the phone and he's telling me about this procurement that another one of our regions had done, and it was protested, right? And he's walking me through and he's asking questions, and I'm, giving him some insight. Oh, I'm not sure I would have done that, but I would have done this and that. And at the end, finally, I said, "Why are you telling me all of this?" So, well, Fetson's taking it over, and I told him we need to get Lisa back to do this. And I'm like, "What? I'm not coming back to." But then again, I did come. They dragged me back, literally dragged me back, because I tried to find somebody else to do it. But um, the thing that made me say okay or convinced me to do it was when the director, I guess he was Steve Kemp. What was his position then? Do you?
He was the class commissioner. He was the commissioner at that time.
He was the commissioner, right? He called me and said, "Lisa, I can't trust anybody to get this done but you." And when he said that to me, I said, "I got you, Steve. I'm going to get this done for you." And that started our development of that procurement for St. Elizabeth.
So this is we're in the major leagues now. We're
Yeah.
talking, where the headquarters of the Department of Homeland Security was going to be. We're talking Congress involvement. We're having, political appointee from GSA, political appointee from DHS, like briefing executive level, on billion-dollar decisions. How do you remain independent? I'm the guy helping to pick whichever company's going to win, but you're the person signing it. How do you keep all the drama above away from the actual process?
It was challenging. If you recall, Steve said to me, he said, "Lisa, I'll give you whatever you need to get this done." And I said, "I'm going to structure a formal source selection board," right? So we had the formal board. We had you as the chair. I think Vire was over the advisory. We had a full board of people. We met with DHS and their political appointees regularly. And I remember in a meeting, we're in this conference room, all of these DHS political appointees, SESs in the room, senior officials on the phone who had dialed in, and they were nervous that this is $1 billion plus. We're going to get a protest. There's no, and I said, there will not be a protest. And I'd never forget them saying, "No, it will." I said, "It won't be a protest because we're going to structure this the right way." And if you remember, Chris, as you met with the technical evaluation board, I think on Mondays at 8:30, you would go down to their office, and I didn't participate, but you would come back and say, "Oh, this is what we want to do." And in some instances, they were adding things to the statement of work. "Well, while we're doing this, let's expand, let's expand." And I'm saying, we're not going to expand. We're going to stay within this scope. And I never forget, I said, "I'm coming down there." Uh, when you meet with them at 8:30, in NCR, I'm coming to the meeting. And I walked through the door, and one of the people from DHS says, "Oh, the principal is here now." I never forgot him saying that to me. But in order to keep all of the noise, I had to follow that structure to the letter. And unless I did that, we would have expanded that scope and expanded that scope. And I just was not going to let that happen. And so we stayed very structured in that process. One of the other things I did too was, because there were so many eyes on it, I intentionally brought in more eyes. So I leveraged some relationships I had with DCAA and had them looking at the pricing structure. Every 2 weeks, I brought in the IG and briefed them on what I was doing because they were watching too. So my thought process was, if you're traveling this road with me all along, at the end, I don't expect you to say I made a wrong turn because you were there with me. And so I briefed them all along the way. Every couple of weeks, I was sitting down with the IG saying, hey, this is what we're doing now. Because this is a lot, you're talking $1 billion plus. This is a lot of money. This has got a lot of eyes on it, truth be told, if it didn't go right, some people could lose a job or two. And so we had to stay very structured, and bringing in DCAA and bringing in the IG along the way really helped in that process. Now, there were a couple of times where people who were not a part of that source selection structure wanted to interject something, but I pushed those back and said, no, unless your name is on this board, you're not a part of this structure. It took a lot of gall to do that because a lot of these people really outranked me, but I had the power of the pen, and I was not going to sign anything that I didn't think didn't follow that right structure.
So I'm glad you went there, because this is the art of being the awarded contracting officer, or the art of actually being effective in doing large acquisition. So let me break it down in terms of simplistic terms. The source selection board, the technical evaluation board, you had identified the key stakeholders across the majority of GSA.
Mm-hmm.
And then also on the source selection panel, the majority of the stakeholders for DHS. So if a company were to challenge it, they wouldn't just be poking at our old office. They would be also poking at two major agencies that had major leverage over the majority of their acquisitions.
Right.
So I just go into this class, we're just talking about stakeholder management, and we're doing, those stand-up meetings. Effective large acquisition to do a single award, not multiple award, not vehicle creation, but pick a winner, is incredibly hard, because you're doing what you just described, but you're not letting the top level people exert preference. They can't, because they weren't part of it. So
Right.
Briefing, informing, but then controlling, that is a really hard thing to execute well.
Very hard to do. And in that acquisition, that was probably one of the hardest ones because there were so many eyes on it. There was so much interest on it. There were a lot of dollars at hand. A lot of senior officials wanted to know what was going on. And to keep them out of the process was extremely difficult. And I remember when we were briefing, we were at the point to briefing the source selection advisory board on who the apparent winner would be. We were at DHS. We were all coming into this room, and then all of these people start piling in. Do you remember that? All of these people start coming in, and I was like, who are these people? Well, people who were part of the advisory board, which were primarily from DHS, were saying, hey, we're getting ready to find out who this apparent went. And they were inviting people in to see, to hear this briefing. And I had invited, the attorney was in there with us. And so we had a PowerPoint presentation, which kind of walked through the entire process. And if you remember, I put up the entire source selection structure, position and name. And I said, if your name is not on this board, I'm going to have to ask you to leave this room.
Yeah.
And that,
You're
do you
kicking
remember
out
that?
political appointees, you're kicking out SESs,
And it was not, I didn't garner any favors from that, but I remained, I wanted to keep that structure in hand. I wanted to keep the integrity of the process. And so when I put that PowerPoint up and said, if your name's not on this board, you're going to have to leave. And people got up and walked out. They weren't happy, but they did get up and they walked out. I I might have heard about it a little bit later, but I had to do what I had to do, Chris, because I wanted to ensure that I maintained the integrity of the process. And one of the other things we did very early on was we set up a separate email box where companies or media or whoever, they had to send their questions in directly into that box to eliminate people from emailing me directly or emailing you directly or emailing people on the contracting team directly. A central box that all of us had access to, that we could see what was coming in. That helped us maintain the integrity of the process because we said early on, any question should come into this box and everybody has visibility in it. So no one can say, well, Chris told me this or Lisa told me that. No, it came to this box and everybody knew what the answer was. So it was all about maintaining the integrity of the process. And I did ask some senior people to leave a room.
Yeah. All right. So we covered your initial career, DOD, a little bit of weirdness at GSA. And then you did something that I don't know anyone else has ever done. People don't go from the executive branch to the legislative branch. That is a hard turn. So, a couple of years as the chief procurement officer at the House of Representatives, and then later the deputy clerk. How do you get that job? What's that? I don't even know what that is.
Listen,
I don't even know what rules you follow.
I tell you what, when I was on the floor with the members sometime at 1 in the morning, I asked myself, why did I get this job? That's for sure. So I left GSA in May, I think, of 2015. And I was offered the position of chief procurement officer for the U.S. House of Representatives. And if you look through my career, I typically didn't stay in agencies very long. I always shifted and moved to learn something new. I left DLA, went to U.S. Marshal Service to the U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command, then to GSA. I was in a couple of offices at GSA, and now I'm at the U.S. House of Representatives. And I think what gave me a second of pause, Chris, was you literally have to resign from federal service when you leave the executive branch and go into the legislative branch. So I had to sign a letter resigning from federal service. They paid me out all of my annual leave and they maintained my sick leave, but you start from zero and you shift over to the legislative branch. That was kind of sobering. I went into an office that no longer legislative branch does not follow the FAR. They have their own guidelines for procurement. So I was in a whole nother arena, and I had a learning curve only because I was so used to following the FAR and the FAR supplements, following the DFARs and the DFAR supplements. And now here I am in the legislative branch, and I have probably a document that's maybe 40 pages that describes how they do procurement. Very simplistic from what I'm used to, but I still have all of those years of acquisition experience with me on how to get the best price, how to do market research, doing what the COR should be doing. And so I kind of brought all of that with me when I went to the legislative branch. I had a staff of, might have been, I think it was about 20 or 23 people that comprised the Office of Acquisition Management for the legislative branch. A portion of that was small purchases that primarily handled the purchases for the member offices. So member of Congress is buying, outfitting their office with something. That portion of my office did the purchasing for them. And then the other portion, which we call the large purchases, bought the items for the CIO and the CFO and the Office of the Clerk and the Sergeant at Arms, for all of the other organizations within the House of Representatives.
Do you have to follow the Buy American Act?
We followed the Buy American Act. We did. We followed the Buy American Act. And the interesting thing is for the member offices, they like to procure from within their district, right? So they want to show that they're buying services out of their district. That was a little challenging for me initially because I didn't operate that way in the executive branch. We had full and open competition. We went out area wide to find sources, but you no longer had to do that. And it took a while to adjust to that. It also took, one of the things I learned was that every acquisition had my signature on it. And so the staff had my signature, and when they awarded a document, they just put my signature on it. Then that's one of the things I changed when I became the chief procurement officer. I'm like, everybody needs to be responsible for their own procurement. Because it's hard for me to justify or defend something that I didn't actually sign it. I didn't actually go through the procurement process. Now, were they doing anything nefarious or wrong? No. They did. I had a staff that knew exactly what they were doing, but my name was still at the bottom of it. So I worked with our CIO's office, and with the procurement system that we were using, they had everyone's signature. And if you hit that button, then your name ended up on that procurement. The larger ones, I had unlimited authority. I signed them. I reviewed them. I signed them. The smaller ones were signed by the staff.
So that's my segue to my surprise question,
Okay.
the fun one. So like, I bought a bunch of weird things, like in your career, you end up, like somebody has a requirement. You're like, we do that.
Mhm.
I asked this one to Soraya the other day, and she knocked my socks off. And so now it's a contest. What's the most surprising or weirdest thing you've ever had to buy? You already said you bought Glocks before, so that's, but people buy, weapons for the military. What's the weirdest thing that came across your desk and like, I can't believe that I'm gonna put my name on buying this thing?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I have to think about that for a minute, Chris. Let me see. So I bought Glocks. I've bought playground equipment. Um, I don't know if I've ever bought anything that I bought gators, the driving gators, cars. I bought for the clerk's office. We have a little mobile car that kind of looks like a Pope mobile. I bought that. That was an interesting procurement, and we called it the Pope mobile because it really does look like a Pope mobile that we use to transport different things around campus. So that's kind of uh, a weird item. I'd have to really, really go back and think after 34 years of procurement, um, anything weirder than those that I named.
I mean, one of the things that I could give you 7 different examples, but I had an ODC on a contract that was for the JIDO office, the IED office that we created after some of the problems that we're having in Iraq. I bought an incredible amount of kitty litter. Kitty litter is one of the things that you use in the improvised explosive device office whenever you're setting up the training for cleaning up after you blow up the car at whatever military base that you're at.
Oh, wow. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
there's always the random thing, like we
Mhm.
do what?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Oh, you want what? Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
All right. So the theme of your career has been, master something, move on. Master something, move on. There's an itch that says like, you
Mhm.
know what? It's, I've been here a couple of years. I'm going to go.
Mhm.
Um, not everybody has that. I imagine that is one of the things that you mentor people on.
Right.
So when like my first question is for like just you professionally, whenever you leave your comfort zone, you leave spot A to go to spot B, and you're trying to establish your credibility in your network. Like what's your, like you show up at a new place and like they clearly hired you for a reason, but you don't know these people.
Mhm.
Like, how do you do it? Because that's the thing that stops people from doing the move.
So I when I retired early part of this year, I kind of thought about that a lot. I After I left uh, INSCOM, every organization I went in to run as an acquisition director of acquisition, I came in from the outside. And so that's very difficult to do because there's already a culture within an organization. And now here comes a new person. It was challenging. It really was challenging at FedSim because that was a cohesive acquisition group. And here I am coming in from the outside. I didn't know anyone in FedSim. And so you have to come in and develop trust among the staff. And that's probably the hardest thing you have to do. I did that at FedSim. I did that going into when I left FedSim and went over to the Office of Acquisition Management, left there and went to the Hill. And part of that is bringing the staff together, giving them your vision, telling them your door is open, and trying to develop individual relationships with the people. Because you learn very early as a leader that your staff, and you have to treat your staff fairly but individually because people react differently in different situations. I had staff that if something goes wrong, they would get so spun up. I had a staff member at FedSim. I won't call her name, but she would get wound up about an issue. Just, oh, they're not doing this. And she said to me one day, why aren't you as upset as I am? And I said, well, if we're both sitting here upset, we're not going to get anything done. So I'm going to listen to you, and then we're going to figure out what we're going to get done. And that kind of calmed her down. So you've got to go into organizations. You've got to develop trust with people, and you got to treat them as individuals and get to know them as individuals. And that is knowing them professionally and personally, and letting them know that their work-life balance is important to you.
I saw you do that like a therapist. There are 7 different ways to do anything in
Mm-hmm.
acquisition. You can, like, and one person wants to do this way, another person is trying to do this whole source, sign this extension, whatever the thing is, and somebody like me is pushing, got to do it,
Uh-huh.
got to do it. Um, and then, you're letting the air out in that you're having a counseling session with them. Like, have you considered,
Mm-hmm.
and like I've saw it like a bunch of times. It's a management technique
Mm-hmm.
that creates the like you said, trust between you and your individual employee, and then ultimately the entire team sees a reasonable outcome versus like the like you said, the emotion of who's right and whether or not we did it right and is it gonna get done on schedule.
Right. I think it's like taking the air. You said it perfectly. Taking the air out of it and just asking the questions. When I came to the office of, um, became the chief procurement office for the Office of Acquisition Management on the Hill, I my staff quickly learned that if you're gonna go before Lisa, you got to have the answers. So the director, who was directly under me, her staff said, "Well, I'm ready to present this," and she said, "We went in there before, and she asked us all these questions we didn't have the answers to. So let's go through this document and anticipate what she's going to ask. I know the CIO wants this done immediately, but this isn't going to get done unless we can get these questions answered. And so it became, it's interesting you say a therapy session. That's funny. But it became a back and forth discussion in my office on what the best solution was, and it lowered the temperature. It lowered the temperature. When I retired from the Hill, the uh, person who now serves as the chief administrative officer, she was the CIO when I was the chief procurement officer. And she spoke at my retirement, and she said, when Lisa came in, she brought in processes and procedures, and then she trained us on them. She didn't just say, here, do this. She said, this is the way we need to be properly doing these procurements, and I'm going to train you on how to do that so that whatever we do, we can stand behind it. And I think that's what you have to do with the staff. I used to tell my staff, I will never go in a room and counter anything that you're saying. Whether I agree with it or not, I will not disagree with you in front of a room of people. I will call you back to my office and say, that I might not have taken that approach, but I'll support you on it if you can show me how you're going to get to the end result. And that helps build trust with the staff. And that's what I had to do whenever I came from the outside in. And it worked pretty well.
The virtual version of that for me was the side chat. You didn't have offices there for a hot second, so that was so we're going to talk about this thing later. I got your back, but
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing. And I would say to my staff, all of them, listen, the worst thing you could do to me is let me be caught by surprise. I don't want to be caught by surprise. So make sure you've got all of the information. I don't want to walk in the room and be blindsided because of something I don't know or you don't know. So do your research, make sure you know whatever the issue is, and I will stand beside you, even if others in those rooms are countering you. I will stand beside you, but we may have to have a sidebar in the end. And we can always go back and correct something we've said. But Chris, you cannot regain trust when you've lost it. And that's what I think leaders need to understand, that you cannot regain trust when you've lost it. And if I have lost the trust of my staff because I've said something in a room that counter what they said, it will be extremely difficult to get that trust back. So I never did that.
I have the same relationship, not just internally, but also with the contractor community that I worked with.
Mm-hmm.
They needed to understand that the process that was going to be followed was transparent. It was fair. Communications would be even. Like your credibility, like your integrity, is the thing that makes the entire process flow.
Right. Exactly. And that is the key word. Your integrity is what makes it flow. When we did the DHS procurement, if you remember, we started that procurement in San Diego. We flew out to San Diego because there was a meeting of contractors out there, and we went out to present, hey, this is upcoming. This is what we're going to do. This is the process we're going to follow. And we took questions. And after that session, that later on that evening, there was a kind of a meet and greet and happy hour or whatever. And several companies after that meeting said, hey, we'll see you at, meet and greet. We've got some more questions. And I didn't go because I was not going to destroy the integrity of that process. I didn't want to put myself in a position to have answered a question for one company that another company did not uh, ask or did not know about. So I made the decision not to go and to maintain the integrity. And I think my career, as you look over my career, I've done that throughout to maintain the integrity of the process. Now, as a contracting officer, as a director of contracting, a chief procurement officer, sometimes they kind of clash with the program side, as we've seen. Um, but in the end, we all got the same mission, and that's to get the job done for whoever the client is with integrity and on time.
So we're in the home stretch here. Covered your career, covered the nature of how buying happens in different different areas, civilian and DoD, and then later at the House. You've graduated, just like I. You're now in retirement. I see posts of public speaking events with your
Yeah.
name associated with them. Is
hmm
this a fun little side, or you're giving leadership lessons to people out there?
Um, it's uh, it's a fun little side. So when I left, let me backtrack. I was the chief procurement officer, and then I got a call one day and from the clerk of the house to ask me to come be the deputy clerk of the house. So I shifted out of acquisition. It was not an easy thing to do, Chris, because I had spent 34 years in acquisition. I'm passionate about it. I love acquisition. I was good at what I was doing. And honestly, I planned to just retire in that spot, but I was asked to come be the deputy clerk for the U.S. House of Representatives. So I moved, and now I have an office in the Capitol, and I'm on the floor with the members every day.
I mean,
That was
I would see your picture standing there holding something, and I'm like, I don't even know what that is. That looks important, but I'm glad that's not me. What when you say you were the deputy clerk? What does that mean?
well, the I asked that question a lot of times myself, Chris. So the clerk's office really is responsible for the legislative part. Their primary responsibility is that legislative part of the House. When bills are written, they come first to the clerk's office to start them in the process um, of flowing through the legislative process. So what I did on a daily basis, I would say, day in the life of the deputy clerk. I was on the floor every time there were votes. We were responsible for the integrity of the votes. If you look at C-SPAN, you'll see members voting. They have a voting card. We're responsible to ensure that voting process, the integrity of that voting process, is maintained. We receive bills into the bill clerk on the floor. Um, we're there to answer any questions that are related to some legislative process. It was my day probably, it started maybe about at 9 o'clock. House comes in session. Whenever the votes are called, I'm headed to the floor. If the votes are called at 3 o'clock, I'm on the floor at 3. If they're called at 10 o'clock in the evening, I'm on the floor at 10 o'clock, just to ensure the integrity of the process. So it's a very visible position because you're seeing a lot of people saw me seated in front of the president for the State of the Union. We one of my responsibilities was, or one of the things we did in the clerk, we took the bills to the White House. So I've delivered bills to the White House for the president's signature. So it was an interesting job to be, very, very interesting. Um, One of the things that the clerk did when I came on board was she rolled the clerk's acquisition underneath me, because I came in as I came in from being the chief procurement officer. So I kind of oversaw the acquisition for the clerk's office as well. Um, there are 200 plus employees in the clerk's office, uh, and they play a pivotal role in the legislative process for the U.S. House of Representatives. So it was interesting. I had a lot of procurement colleagues ask that same question. How did you get that job? How did you transition into that job? But Chris, it took business acumen, it took problem solving, it took working well with others. All of those things you use in the acquisition world in order to do that job. So then, after doing it for 3 years, I decided it's time to retire. Um, I had planned to retire at the end of 23 and stayed through 24 to manage the transition from the 118th Congress to the 119th Congress. So I did that, and in doing that, I took a paper process, a transition that was a paper process for over 100 years, and converted to a digital process. So now going forward, all of that transition, the transition process in the House, which is a huge undertaking for the Office of the Clerk, is not digital. And that's what I worked on in 24, making that a digital process. And now I've retired. I do some public speaking, some keynote speaking. I love talking about um, leadership lessons that I've learned over my 37 years of federal service. Um, I love mentoring acquisition professionals on how to serve their clients because we're in the service industry. We really are. And so I've done a lot of that. I've done some consulting for some companies to help them move forward in some of the business capture that they want to do. So that's what I've been doing in retirement.
Awesome. Well, that has reached the hour point of
Oh,
our
wow.
podcast. We said we were going to be faster this time, and we were not. I want to thank our guest here, Lisa Grant, who has had an amazing career working for the federal government. And now, if you want to know how it works, and you want to interact with somebody, connect with Lisa on LinkedIn. And the Optimized podcast from Visible Thread will be back in 2 weeks.
Very good. This has been great. Can I leave with one thing, Chris?
Yeah.
Let me say this to any acquisition professional. I've had a lot of jobs, but I've never left a job I couldn't go back to. And so when you leave with integrity, leave as a professional, and never leave where you can't go back. I've never gone back, but I've been recruited to come back. But I've never gone back, but never leave a job you can't go back to.